Well, welcome back into the Polytunnel here in the mid-Norfolk garden. It's doing very well. I'm very pleased with the way these tomatoes are coming on. I did originally think I'd planted them far too close together, and I've certainly got carried away with the numbers we've planted in here. You can see the succession of planting as we've worked our way along these beds. The earliest ones that went in, and we were late starting this year with the Polytunnel not being delivered and put up successfully till middle of May, but we got planting at that end, and you can see we've got some really lovely trusses of tomatoes coming on. Just look at these. Growing them on the cordon method, which is the method I've always been taught to grow tomatoes. Single stem, taking out the side shoots, tying them in for support on bamboo canes, and they're growing really well, almost up to the top of these 7-foot canes. I suppose they're not quite 7 foot. Had to put shorter canes in at the back because of the curve of the polytunnel. I wanted to keep those canes well away from the plastic liner of the polytunnel. Got a whole mixture of unknown varieties growing in here. We've done the old trick of saving seeds from tomatoes that we've really enjoyed eating. So we've got mainly plum tomatoes, these little round ones. I don't know what those are, probably Moneymaker or some other commercial variety. We don't know, of course, when you grow from seed whether they're going to come true or whether you're going to get a cross, because you don't know what's pollinated them in the house that they've been grown in. But I'm assuming most of these commercial varieties that we've done this with are grown in isolation. And certainly, although we haven't eaten anything off these yet, we've got some really good trusses all over these. These ones probably only went in maybe about 6 weeks ago now. Probably a beefsteak tomato variety, this one, but they are all mixed up, so we just planted them as we'd potted them on and they were ready for putting out. And you can see in the corners of the polytunnel we've got cucumbers growing up strings that we've used the support of the polytunnel framework to create, and they're doing very well. But again, early July we still had no cucumbers. What we have been harvesting is basil from the tray we planted with seeds. They've done really well. Beautiful crop of young basil. It's starting to suffer a bit now from lack of nutrients. I think that's going to need cutting back and feeding, but it's overcrowded terribly. But what we are starting to pick now is some French beans from this little planting that we've got along the front. Again, these were the later ones to go in. You can see they've flowered beautifully and are starting to form some lovely beans. As we get further along, they get bigger and more mature, and I like picking them at that stage when they're nice and small, just nipping them. And I'm going to harvest a load of beans off these today. As I come along, you can see we're really into cropping season. They've started giving us some beans about a week earlier than the ones outside, so not much in it this year, but it has been a fantastic spring, and the ones outside have done particularly well. What has been a real success are the strawberry plants that we bought ready potted up in containers from a garden centre early this year. I picked these yesterday, so if you're looking at these thinking there's not much ripe on them, that's because these ones were the ones that were left to come on. They've done really, really well. Perpetual, what I call perpetual strawberries. There are two varieties in here which we showed you earlier in the season, but I've been feeding those a little bit, watering them well, and that's the key, I think, to keep these hanging baskets well watered, because they're not in oversized baskets, but they have done exceptionally well. We've had 3 of those, 2 on this side, 1 on the other. Well, there's one of the labels. I can show you the variety if you want to look out for this one. Toscana, which has done really well. And I've dropped these runners down, some of which are suitable for putting into pots. Others with these varieties, you can see this one here, we've got a runner, but hanging off it, good crop of strawberries. So it's been quite tricky to propagate these, but I've come up with a little makeshift hanging pot here, which I'm hopefully, can't see any roots coming out the bottom to cut it off yet, but it's flowering away, but still fruiting. So a little bit tricky in terms of propagating these when you decide to cut these hanging runners off or try and get them potted in without damaging the fruit that's developing on each of the runners. But I'm planning on extending the number of these we've got in here. I've got 1, 2, 3 central crop bars going across this polytunnel. I think I can get 4 on each crop bar, so taking a total of 12 hanging baskets of strawberries next year. They've still been the only strawberries we've picked in the whole garden. I had the strawberry plants. You can see these are the runners that were in the Virgiga raised beds, but despite my best efforts to keep the birds off them, we got rodents coming up from the centre of the Virgigas and eating all the strawberry plants, so we didn't manage to harvest a single strawberry off the Virgiga raised beds, although the plants looked absolutely superbly healthy earlier in the season. So I'm going to grow my strawberries in hanging baskets each year in fresh compost and new runners. We'll see how we get on with those. You can see at this end of the polytunnel my very late plantings. I know you'll be looking at these aubergine plants thinking he's probably not going to get anything off this, but it's a little bit of spare space where the table was with the seed bed. I was very, very late sowing these. Same with the peppers. You can see they've been pecked to death by the chickens who found these. One of their pastimes in the afternoon was to come in whenever it was raining into the polytunnel and eat my pepper plants. They were looking far healthier than that last week. So we're having to keep the doors shut, and I'm going to have to mock up some netting to keep the wildlife out of this polytunnel while I still have the ventilation in here. You can see these these tomatoes at this end are the very last ones we planted out, the last few. Rather than put them on the compost heap, we've got the space, so we've put them out. I don't know whether this is going to extend my cropping season. I mean, these ones are almost up to the top of the poles. I'm going to have to nip those out. I know commercial growers would start laying them down and letting them continue to grow. I don't think I'm going to have the space to do that or the ability to lay them down particularly easily. I may let some of the side shoots come out lower down. They are very vigorous plants, these, and you can see we've not fed them at all. They are growing through fresh mushroom compost, which is about 6 inches deep here on top of the topsoil underneath. We just scalped the soil, laid fresh mushroom compost on, and that's been down here since middle of May, and they're loving it. I've not had to feed these at all, just water them with the hose pipe you can see lying there. A little bit of tomato food that I've brought out to start feeding these if they're starting to show any signs of nutrient problems, but at the moment they're not. I've still got my citrus trees, my lemon trees in here. They're growing really beautifully, but still no sign of them putting out flowers. So I think these two are going to stay in recovery in here for the rest of this season. I'm starting to feed them with the tomato food to try and get them into flower, because I've got not a single lemon on either of these two trees, but we were really successful with the neem oil treating the scale insects, which had really taken their toll on these two plants. They're in quite decent sized pots, but we do have to water these specifically because they're not ideal if they're not in the ground for watering with a hose. So that's why the watering can's here with a bit of tomato feed. I'm trickling that into these pots to try and get them into some really good growth. So all in all, doing very well, and I'm very pleased with this polytunnel and the progress. Looking forward to our first tomato, which I'm hoping is going to be sometime during July. Advice: would you take the down bottom leaves to expose the tomato trusses as they've formed? I've always got mixed feelings about this. I know a lot of growers do start taking the leaves from the base upwards off, but these are looking so healthy. Supposed to allow light to the tomatoes to encourage them to ripen, but I'm not certain that makes any difference at all when you've got them in such a nice light growing area as we have here in this polytunnel. And I always think by removing those leaves, you're removing some of the food producing, nutrient processing ability of the plant to actually give you some really nice large tomatoes at the top of the truss. And are you sacrificing good quality large tomatoes higher up for earlier tomatoes at the bottom of the trusses, if you see what I mean. I may try taking some of the leaves off the ones in the outer row. We've got these planted in blocks of 9, 3 on the outside, 3 in the middle and 3 on the inner side. This is the southern face, if you like, of this polytunnel. This is the north face. The light's not what's made the difference in the size of the plants we've got here. That was when they were planted and grown out, because we've been sowing seeds continuously for the last couple of months. So I might try just taking some of the leaves off on the outer southern aspect rows to see if those ones, which I suspect get more light, if it makes a difference and they ripen up any quicker than the inner rows here. I don't think it's going to make much difference, but I might give it a go, because planted at the base of here we've got more cucumbers and in the corner a melon, which I need to keep access to down that back row. So by taking the leaves off on the lower parts of the vines, it will encourage hopefully a bit more early ripening, but also make my access to those back areas a little bit easier. So that's my thoughts anyway. We're doing okay. Quite happy with our progress for first year, and looking forward to a bumper crop of tomatoes this year. Thanks for watching.